Hey everyone, and welcome. We're about to dig into one of the most complicated and honestly uncomfortable truths in all of American history. We're going to talk about a group of men who were absolutely essential to winning the Civil War, but whose real motives have been a huge question mark ever since.
It's a tough question, right? We love our history to be black and white. You've got your good guys, you've got your bad guys. But the real world, as you know, is almost never that simple. And today, we're diving headfirst into that messy, fascinating gray area. You know, this one sentence is pretty much the spark for this entire explainer. It's an amazing way to frame it. This isn't just a history lesson, it's a trial. It's a chance for us to look at the evidence and decide for ourselves. So let's go ahead and open the case file. Okay, so welcome to the courtroom. We are about to put some of the most powerful men of the 19th century on a metaphorical witness stand. We're here to figure out their true role in America's most defining conflict. And here's how we're going to do it. We're going to play both sides. We'll be the prosecution, laying out all the charges of greed and corruption, and then we'll be the defense, showing just how indispensable they were to victory. The goal here isn't to point fingers, but to really, truly understand. So who exactly are our defendants in this historical trial? Well, it's really important to get this straight. We are not talking about generals like Ulysses S. Grant or politicians like Abraham Lincoln. Nope. We are talking about the titans of industry, the guys who literally built the Union's war machine from the ground up. First step in the dock, the railroad baron. You have to remember, this war was fought over a massive continent. Logistics were absolutely everything. And these guys, they controlled the arteries of the Union Army, moving hundreds of thousands of soldiers and millions of tons of supplies to the front lines faster than anyone thought possible. Without them, the entire war effort would have just stopped. Next, we have the steel magnate. Think about it. Cannons, rifles, those game-changing ironclad ships, and thousands upon thousands of miles of railroad tracks, all of it had to come from somewhere. It came from the furnaces and factories run by these industrial giants. They basically turbocharged America's industrial power to meet the insane demands of this new, modern kind of warfare. And finally, let's bring in the Wall Street financier. Wars are incredibly, unimaginably expensive. These were the men who raised the money, who sold the war bonds, and who managed the gigantic sums needed to keep the Union Army paid, fed, and armed. They figured out how to turn Northern money into a decisive weapon of war. Okay, so now let's flip the script. Let's hear the case for the prosecution. Because while these men were building this incredible arsenal, you have to ask, what was the real cost? What were the charges that people leveled against them, both at the time and by historians today? And let me tell you, the indictment is pretty severe. We're talking about accusations of egregious price gouging, charging the government way, way too much for things the Army desperately needed. There were horror stories about selling shoddy equipment, things like uniforms that would literally dissolve in the rain, or rifles that were known to misfire. And on top of all that, there were claims of ruthless market manipulation, using inside information about battles to make a fortune on the stock market. And this right here, this is the very definition of a war profiteer. It gets to the heart of the whole issue. So the key question the prosecution poses is this: were these men really serving the country, or were they just serving themselves, using a national crisis as the ultimate business venture? In short, the prosecution's argument is that while young men were dying on the battlefield, these industrialists saw the bloodshed mainly through the lens of a profit and loss statement. They saw a national tragedy, and they saw it as the single greatest business opportunity of their entire lives. But as you know, every trial has a defense. And their argument is simple, it's direct, and it's incredibly powerful. It all comes down to one thing. Look at the result. They argue that without their ambition, their money, and their industrial power, the Union would have lost the war. Period. The defense points to their absolutely staggering achievements. I mean, they created a system of mass production that the world had literally never seen before. They gave the Union an unmatched logistical edge that the Confederacy could never, ever hope to compete with. And in the end, they harnessed the North's massive economic power and aimed it like a cannon at the Southern war effort until it just crumbled. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, because you can see how it's just two sides of the exact same coin. The prosecution screams unfettered greed, but the defense comes back with patriotic ambition, arguing that the desire for profit was the very engine that built the war machine. The prosecution sees corrupt practices, while the defense sees wartime innovation, saying, hey, they had to invent new rules for a new kind of war. It's the exact same set of actions, just seen through two completely different lenses. So that brings us right back to the central question, and we're asking you, the jury, to think about it. After hearing both sides, where do you land? Do you see them as cynical predators who cashed in on a crisis? Or were they flawed, maybe greedy, but ultimately ambitious patriots who did whatever it took to win? Of course, these men never actually stood trial in a real courtroom, but make no mistake, history delivered a verdict of its own, because their impact didn't stop when the last cannon went silent at Appomattox. Oh no, in a way, it was just getting started. And this timeline just lays it out perfectly. You can draw a straight line. The war ends in 1865, and boom, this new industrial superpower emerges from the ashes. This flows directly into the Gilded Age of the 1870s, an era totally defined by the immense wealth and corporate power these guys had built up. By 1890, that power had gotten so huge that the public and the government had to step in and push back with antitrust laws. And the debate they started, it's still going on today, every time we talk about capitalism, profit, and the public good. So here's the ultimate takeaway. Their methods, for better and for worse, didn't just win a war. They forged a brand new kind of nation, one built on an industrial scale, dominated by huge corporations and powered by capital in a way nobody could have even imagined before 1861. And that leaves us with one last massive question. They helped save the Union, and in doing so, they built the economic foundations of the country we live in today. But they did it using methods that were often ruthless, corrupt, and incredibly self-serving. So I'll leave you with this to chew on. Does the end justify the means? That's something we're thinking about. Thanks for joining me.